right, let me remind you where we are headed. We're gonna create this little treat box today, and I'm going to start by blending that layered moon stencil. Whitney, you're gonna have to remind me the name of the stencil. I have the number. It's 294, but I can't remember the name of this. Moonlight or something along those lines. It is a 3-layer stencil.
Moonlight layering stencil.
I was right. Moonlight layering stencil. I should trust myself more. Okay. It does have the alignment guides, but I think as long as we blend this solid circle, it should be pretty easy to line up with the next layers. So I'm going to tack this paper down. We are going to end up die cutting this, so I'm not too concerned about where the moon lands on the cardstock. I just need a piece big enough to hold it. All right. Thank you, Beth, for not making me feel silly for sharing my share moments. All right, so our first stencil layer is going to be our lightest color. This is the kind of base of the moon, and I have lavender glaze ink. This is not, I know you guys are kind of wondering what happened to Taylor. I'm using a lot of purple lately. My nails are purple. I think with the introduction of so many new purples into our collection, it has become a favorite of mine. So did I just say favorite? I think I did. I know, we can't tease Taylor about purple anymore because I do use it quite often, actually. So we're gonna go ahead and blend this lightest color over the whole open circle. You know what? I heard about that. Shell said that we had a story on the news yesterday about maturing sweet corn can release up to 4 cups of moisture a day per stalk of corn. They did some story about, you know, humidity in Iowa and how it affects the corn and what it causes the corn to do. And they did some calculations about how many billions of gallons of water corn can produce when it's hot. Isn't that strange? I never knew that before. Anyway, fun fact from Shell. All right, so that was layer 1. And layer 2 is going to be macaron. So we'll get layer 2 of the stencil. It is the slightly more detailed one. And again, it should be easy to see the outline of the stencil. You shouldn't need those alignment squares, but they are there if they make you feel better. All right. Tack this down and we'll do this.
Wasn't it just the other night you were saying to me, look at the moon. It looks exactly like our moonlight layering.
I did. Oh my goodness. I was over at Whitney's house and the kids were playing outside and we looked up and said, look at the beautiful moon. And the more I looked at it, I said, it looks just like our layering stencil. You could kind of see the, I don't know if you call them craters in the moon, or you could just see the shadows over the moon. Everybody's saying where they replaced Taylor. Check on Taylor. Whitney, you're funny. The real Taylor's at Hy-Vee buying candy. No guys, it's me. I'm here. Okay, then the last layer of the stencil is this kind of the least detailed one. Make sure I'm keeping those details in the opening of the that we've already blended. Tack this down, and then the final color is the darkest. I am gonna do a light-handed blend of this Concord Grape. So Concord Grape is another new purple that we've added since I started my love of purple. And it's really kind of got some blue tones to it, almost a a royal bluish purple, a blurple. I think that's where I've determined my love of purple is in blurple. We'll see, maybe I'll start wearing purple too.
Gas.
I know, right? Okay, so there's Concord Grape. And then let's take this off. You can see that fun moon. Now I'm going to die cut this first, but you can see in my sample that's over here, once we die cut it, we're gonna hit the edges with blue corn. That's gonna give it a little bit more of a spooky look than this kind of bright purple that I have right now. But I do wanna die cut that first. So I'm gonna grab my circle stacklet dies and we'll bring in the die cut machine as well. Let's see if I can guess which circle it is. Looks like that's the right one. Okay, tack this down. Send it through. Okay, there's our moon. Again, a super fun option if you want to do this with yellow inks. You can see Sue's, and one of the things that she did that I thought was fun was she started with potato chip cardstock, and then she only used 2 layers of the stencil. So you could do that as well if you start with the base color, the lightest color of cardstock, and then layer the darker colors on top of that. That's another option if you're looking to speed things along or just give you a little bit different look. Okay, let's get our blue corn ink out and we'll finish off this moon and then move on to the next step here. So we'll take and add that darkest color. And I like to rotate my die cut as I'm pulling this in from the edges. Just kind of gives me the control that I want and make sure I'm hitting all of those edges equally. Just kind of shifting that as I go around. I like to keep the center of the moon kind of bright so it glows a little bit, but you can see that adding that blue corn color gave us a little bit more of that spooky moon look. Let's quickly wipe off the ink from my work surface here. And adhesive that I think we're done with. Beth, good question. I did. So on the back of my treat box, it is just white. On the back of Sue's, it's yellow, which is maybe another reason to go for that colored cardstock. I've got some adhesive that I need to take off of here with my adhesive eraser, but yes, my moon is just white on the back. Okay, so here's that. Let's go ahead and blend. I have one of the tombstones that I die cut from poppy seed cardstock. This is kind of the color one shade lighter than black, and I like to use that when I know I want to get a little bit of dimension so that I can use black ink to blend in from the sides of the tombstone. So we'll do that. All right, we'll keep the center kind of the color of the cardstock so that it has a little bit of a glow to it. And then we're going to splatter or spatter, whatever you choose. Let me get my splatter all set up and then I'll bring in my splatter box. So I'm using a couple of different splatters. I wanted to use both white and black, so I have my Dr. P.H. Martin's Black Star and the Bleed Proof White. I'll go ahead and put the black star on first. This one has a little eyedropper that comes with it, and it's more of a liquid. You do not need to mix it with any water. I just put 3 or 4 drops out there. Then I'm going to grab my paintbrush, and this one is more of a paint-like medium that you'll want to grab a little bit out with a brush, and you can just put that down on your block. And then this one, you do need to activate it with water in order for it to be splatterable. And a couple drops of water there, and just mix it with the paintbrush. Now, if you're doing both black and white splatter, I would recommend using 2 different brushes, because that black is pretty, it stays in your brush until you bring it to a sink and actually wash it out. So I have 2 different brushes, and I'll bring in my splatter box then. Hopefully I don't get any splatter on anything other than the box.
Yeah, because Whitney will be upset.
Whitney will find it later and be like, why do we have splatter on all these cameras? Okay, let's do white first. So I've got my paintbrush loaded up with the splatter, and then we'll go ahead and just start to tap it down onto the tombstone. And then I'll go ahead with the black. Now this one is going to be less noticeable, but I like to do a little bit of both. I think it just adds that extra dimension to the project, makes it look more aged and realistic. Okay, now let me pull this out and we will dry that off, or let that dry. It doesn't take too long. As we finish creating the rest of the portions of the project, I think it will be dry by the time we're ready to assemble. Okay, next I am going to grab my Spooky Season die set and the moon. We are going to stamp the bats kind of coming up the side of the moon, and I'll be embossing those with the black sparkle embossing powder. I have my Misty here. Okay. And I am going to position these kind of so this part up here with the tiny bats is right up towards the top kind of center of the moon. And then I can hold that in place with my magnet. I'll go ahead and pick that up. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take one of our clear alignment panels. Let me put a little bit of adhesive. I think I have a little bit, but maybe not enough. I want some adhesive down there to make sure that stays in place. And I'm going to take one of our clear alignment panels. Just want to make extra sure that when I stamp this down that the bats are actually going where I would like them to. So I'm going to stamp onto the grid or the clear alignment. It doesn't have a grid on it, but there are some in the package that do have grids so that you can line up sentiments and things like that. All right, pull that up here and you can see I have those bats perfectly where I want them. And I'm going to keep that where it's at. And we need to powder. I know that some people have rules about not powdering in their Misty. Not a bad rule to have, because I've seen some accidents before where the powder gets into the base of the Misty. But one of the ways that we prevent that with our powder tool is just to make sure that we have this little bit of washi tape that kind of decorates our powder tool. And that keeps the closure between the rim where it unscrews so that you can refill it. So just a little tip. It's okay to powder in your Misty if you have protected your powder tool. Okay. I'm I'm gonna bring in my embossing powder and we'll stamp one more time. I'm using VersaFine Clair ink, and this particular ink is a pigment, so it stays wet longer and allows you to emboss with embossing powder using this ink. So we're gonna go ahead and dump the black sparkle on top of these stamped bats. Kind of depends how fancy you want to get with your project. You don't have to do these steps, all of them. You could just stamp the bats in black and leave it as is, but sparkly bats are kind of fun too. So let's go ahead and heat that up. Can't forget my mini mitts.
Those mini mitts, man.
So helpful, right? When you have a little piece like this that's already die cut and you're trying to heat it, you don't want to burn your fingers. It's what we use to craft, so save yourself. And all right, use your mini mitts. They're made of silicone, so they will protect your fingers from the heat as you heat with your embossing gun. Sparkly black bats up the moon. I love it. Holly says those bats remind me of Scooby-Doo.
I was thinking that.
Oh, yes. Okay, so let's set that aside and go ahead with our sentiment. So I'm going to grab some silver foil cardstock. I have my stamp set from the kit. We're going to use Death by Chocolate, which is going to be the perfect sentiment for my little Reese's skeletons. And, all right, so we're going to do something different on this, and this was a trick that I learned from Sue. I think she was the first to show me this idea, but we have our foil cardstock that is mirrored. You can see as I hold it up to the light, you can kind of see reflection in it. And when you're doing these types of Halloween projects where you want it to be a little bit spooky, here is a little tip for burnishing your foil cardstock and making it look like a matte finish cardstock. I'm only going to do it on half of the piece here because we only need a little piece for our project, but I have our sanding block here, and I'm actually going to go in a crosshatch motion and just apply a little bit of pressure with the sanding block, and you're going to see this kind of roughen up and create a fun texture, but also it's going to create a kind of a matte finish look to the cardstock. I'm trying to get it in the right light so you can see that difference there, but let me go the other direction so that it's kind of roughed up in both directions, and you have sort of a fun, almost a galvanized metal looking over here, and then you have your perfectly shiny over on the other side. It also allows it to be stamped on a little bit easier, so I am going to stamp my sentiment directly onto this piece. We're going to emboss it with the same embossing powder we used for the bats, the black sparkle. So let me grab all the things that I need again. Could you get me an acrylic block? I'm sorry.
Medium-sized one?
Whatever size. Small, medium, preferably not large. That's great. Okay, I'm just going to do this with an acrylic block instead of putting this out in the misty. I've got my Death by Chocolate. We're going to use our powder tool again on this side of the cardstock, which we can burnish or we can kind of buff off at the end. got the VersaFine Clair ink again, and we'll stamp this down in the center. So doing that technique on the cardstock gives it just a little bit of extra tooth, and that's a word in the kind of cardstock world that's used to describe like texture, or tooth gives it like just a little bit of resistance, I guess. It's not super smooth, and that allows you to stamp it without your stamp kind of moving around and mushing your words. Hopefully my words aren't mushing in your brain, because words are hard sometimes. Hopefully that explanation makes sense, but it not only gives it a fun Halloween-y texture and appearance, but it also helps with your stamping. So there's Death by Chocolate. I'll grab my heat tool and we'll heat that. All right, then we'll go ahead and die cut that sentiment as well. Oh, that's a fun tip. I'll have to try that, Candy. Candy says on foil paper, if you spray alcohol on the paper, it will look like galvanized metal as well. So that's a fun little tip too. Okay, we're gonna use this die to cut out the Death by Chocolate, and then I think we'll have almost all the pieces we need to put our scene together. I have the ghost that's pre-cut, but I'm also going to bring in some of our, I mentioned this one a couple weeks ago, stock up on this, our black glossy cardstock. This little circle that's in the Creepy Companion die is designed to fit behind the ghost eyes and mouth. So you can easily make those whatever color you want. And in this case, I kind of like the look of glossy black. So we're gonna cut that at the same time. This one I'm going to tape down. I don't want to live on the edge with my perfectly embossed sentiment. Okay. Candy says not all foil paper works for that alcohol technique, and she hasn't tried it with our foil paper yet. So I can try that out and report back. Okay, so there's our little Tombstone label and the black circle of cardstock. We'll do that part first. I'm going to take and apply my adhesive around the ghost's eyes and mouth. And we'll adhere that down. Just like that. Then we have this. What did I do with my box? Here's my, nope, that's not my box. I think I put it back away in the kit. So I folded this for you a little bit earlier, but it comes together so simply. The way that I like to kind of start the adhering process is with this long strip here. And you can do this with sticky tape if you have that, like a 1/4 inch is the perfect size for that. I'm using just a regular tape runner. You can also use liquid glue. Then I would fold this down flat and kind of fold over the front of the box, which is going to meet up perfectly with that side flap. So that's how you know you have it perfectly squared up and adhered, because it should lay completely flat as you're adhering it. Now the bottom of the box, you can fold this little flap up, and if you want to, you can just tuck it in and it stays pretty well, but if you want to add some extra adhesive on there just to make sure it stays closed, you can do that too. And then there's another flap on the top that you can just fold over, tuck in. We have that little loop here. It's kind of hard to see. There it is. That little loop that allows you to get your finger in there and easily pull open the lid. All right, let's put some adhesive on the back of this. I want to put my moon on here first, so I'm kind of sizing this up to see where I want my moon to sit with those bats coming. And then we'll go ahead and tack this down. Just like that. A little bit of death by chocolate on the front then, and I'm going to do that with some foam tape. And then I'll finish it off with the ghost. Oh, good. Candy helped me out. She did it while I've been live and tested out the foil cardstock, and spraying it with alcohol does work. So that's fun. Okay, we've got that. Then now let's tuck our little ghost kind of coming up into the moon and off to the side of the tombstone. And I think I'll go ahead and put a little piece of foam tape on it as well.
This little ghosty reminds me of Casper.
It does. He's a happy little ghost.
He's a happy little ghost.
All right. Pop that up on top. I think that looks good right about there. He's kind of filling the open space on the left side where the bats are not. Ta-da! Super simple. It was fun to add a few extra details to this, but really you can keep them very simple. Without the moon, these would be really fast to create as mass-produced little treat boxes. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're feeling inspired. Let me come back here and give you a little update on what's to come this week, which